Today's lesson is on minor scales. There are several types of minor scales, and the one we're going to look at today is what I was taught to as the natural minor scale. Now, this also, I've seen this referred to as the pure minor scale, and also I've seen it referred to as the Aeolian mode. But the point is, this is the first minor scale that people usually work with, and it's used a lot. So we're going to take a look at this one. So we picked the minor scale that I picked was the A minor scale, and the reason that I chose A minor is because this scale has no sharps or flats in it. So sort of similar to the C major scale, only we have a minor scale here, and it has no sharps or flats. And the notes are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, which makes it very easy to remember. Start at the beginning of the alphabet, go through the alphabet till you come back to A. So anyway, this is our scale. So I have the notes of the scale numbered, and A is the root note of the scale, so I'm going to go ahead and just write that in there. And also this A here is an octave to the root. So now we have our A minor scale. And for anyone who is not familiar with scales, scale tone chords, or keys, I suggest you go back and you watch lesson number 3. We introduced the major scale, and we learned about scale tone chords and quite a few other things in the lesson. So if you're not familiar with these concepts, you may want to go back and watch lesson number 3. So we have our scale, and like the major scale, we can generate a set of scale tone chords. And the method that we use to do this is the same method we use for the major scale. So we have our root note here. If we want to derive a chord based on the root note A, we can derive a 3-note chord by starting with A, and then we're going to skip over the B, so we have C, and then we're going to skip over the D, and we have E. So now we have an A chord. And we can do this with every note of the scale. So now we have a set of chords, and each chord is based on a particular note of the scale. And these are the scale tone chords. We have a minor scale, which is a series of notes, and we have a series of chords that we've generated using these notes. And these notes of the scale, along with the melodies we can create using the notes of the scale, and along with the different ways we can arrange the chords to make songs, makes up what's known as the key of A minor. So this is what we have here. We have the key of A minor. But as you can see, we can generate a series of 3-note chords from the notes of the scale. And the names of the chords, the A chord is A minor. And the B chord is... So these are our scale tone chords. And for anyone who's familiar with major scales and the scale tone chords of major scales, you'll notice that the order of the chords is different. We have a minor scale, so the root note is A, and the 1 chord will be a minor chord, because now we're dealing with a minor key. So we have the 1 chord as a minor chord, in this case A. We also have the 4 chord as a minor chord, and we have the 5 chord as the minor chord. So these are our 3 minor chords. It's sort of similar to when we're dealing with a major key, where the 1, 4, and 5 chords are major. We have the 1, 4, and 5 chords here, minor, in a minor key. And we have 3 major chords. However, the major chords are now the chord that represents the 3rd note of the scale, the 6th note of the scale, and the 7th note of the scale. And finally, we have our diminished chord, which represents the 2nd note of the scale. So as you can see, we have major chords, we have three minor chords, 3 major chords, and we have a diminished chord. And this is sort of the same as when we're dealing with a major key, but the difference is the chords are in different places as far as the numbers are concerned. So that's the first thing you want to sort of get around your head, is that when you're dealing with scale tone chords in a minor key, in this case, the key of A minor, the 1, 4, and 5 chords are now minor. And the 3, 6, and 7 chords are major. And the 2 chord is diminished. So this is what happens when we generate our triads, our 3-note chords. But we can also generate a series of 4-note chords. And the way we do that is very similar to the way we generated the 3-note chords. The only difference is we start with our A, skip over this B and take the C, skip over this D and take this E, and those are the same notes of the chord we just derived. But now what we're going to do is we're going to continue, and we're going to skip over this F and we're going to take the G. So now we have a 4-note chord, and we can do this for every note of the scale, ultimately generating a set of 4-note chords. Now that we have 4-note chords, the names of the chords will change. So for anyone who's not familiar with these chord types, I would suggest that you go back and watch lesson number 29, where we introduce the 4-note chords and sort of go into a little bit more depth on this. Now, what I want to point out is that you notice our 7 chord is the dominant 7th chord. When we're dealing with the minor scale, the natural minor scale, the note that is associated with the 7th note of the scale is known as the dominant. So that's why when we generate our 4-note chord, it's called the dominant 7th chord. So now that we've sort of introduced this basic information, I'd like to take a little bit closer of a look at how this scale is constructed. And I'm going to just erase some of this stuff out of here. And what I want to do here now is I'd like to do an analysis of this scale. And what I want to analyze is the interval sequence. So now what we've revealed is the interval sequence. And this is actually the formula for a minor scale. If we start with a root note and then we follow this sequence, we will have a minor scale. And for anyone who's not familiar with the concept of intervals, you may want to go and watch lesson number 2. If you know how to follow the interval sequence, you can derive or create your own minor scales. And I encourage anyone to do this, especially if anyone has followed through these lessons and they know the material that was presented in the earlier lessons. I definitely would suggest to them that they start to work on writing out some minor scales, because writing out scales actually helps you to learn the scale. So this is a very important sequence to memorize, along with the sequence that that we learned for the major scale. What I'd like to do is, just take a look at this scale. we have a A minor scale, and we have no sharps or flats in it. Now, some of you may be familiar with the C major scale. And I just want to write out a C major scale here. C, D. Well, if we look at these two scales, they both contain the same exact notes. The only difference is the note order is different. We start on A here, but if we started on, when we start here, it's sort of like picking up the scale from the C. So these two scales have exactly the same notes. The A minor scale is what's known as a relative minor scale. And what that means is, if we have a major scale, for every major scale, there is a minor scale that contains exactly the same notes. And the minor scale is called the relative minor to the major scale. So we have a C major scale here. And I want to direct your attention to the A note. And the A note is the sixth note of the scale. And the way the rule works is that if you have a major scale, the sixth note of the major scale that you have is the root note of the relative minor scale. In terms of the notes of the scale, they're exactly the same. I just want to show you that we could do this with any major scale. So if I have a G major scale, the note that is the sixth note of the scale, which in this case is now E, becomes the root note to the relative minor scale. So this is a very important thing to sort of recognize and understand. What this really means is, for every major scale you know, there's a minor scale that you also know. That's about it for the lesson. Just wanted to kind of show you how minor scales are created, the natural minor scale, and also to sort of show you how we can derive scale tone chords with minor scales. And the chords, or the triads, are still major, minor, and diminished. However, when you compare a minor scale with a major scale, and you compare scale tone chords, the position of the major and minor chords is different. So a little bit of time and study with the minor scale is definitely helpful. But if you have your set of scale tone chords, now you're ready to start playing in a minor key. For those of you who are familiar with playing through scale tone chords, now you can start playing through your scale tone chords in the key of A minor. So put in your time, put in your work, and I hope to see you at the next lesson. Peace.